Real quickly before we begin, I want to thank this video's sponsor, carmarshal.com. Carmarshal.com can save you lots of money on buying used or new vehicles, cars, trucks, school buses. If you want to save money, I'll have a link in the description down below. I know I'm going to
33 years ago today, police firebombed a neighborhood in Philly, killing women and children. 11 people were killed in Philadelphia on May 13, 1985, in one of the worst acts of police terrorism against the civil rights movement in U.S. history. By John Vibes, May 13, 2018. Since the beginning of time, there has been a constant struggle between people who want to be free and those who seek to control them. It is an unending war that rages just beneath the surface of civilized society, waiting to reach a boiling point where violence can erupt on the streets between police and citizens or the oppressor and the oppressed. Since our history is passed down by those who seek to control us, this struggle is framed in a way where the oppressors are always the innocent victims, and the oppressed the senseless terrorists, when in reality, the opposite is usually true. Nowhere is this situation more obvious than in the media coverage and cultural myth surrounding the American civil rights movement. Police would regularly raid the offices and homes of civil rights leaders, shooting first and asking questions later. In fact, many civil rights leaders did not make it through the 60s and 70s alive, and most of the original Black Panthers were either killed by police or imprisoned for life. Yet this aspect of the situation was entirely absent from the media reports of the day and is even rarely discussed in modern times. One of the worst acts of police terrorism against the civil rights movement occurred on May 13, 1985, when the Philadelphia Police Department bombed the homes of a black liberation group called MOVE, killing 11 people, 5 of whom were children. MOVE was a Philadelphia-based organization formed by civil rights leader John Africa in 1972, with the goal of creating a radical change in society by creating communities that lived according to their own rules and values, instead of under the authority of the federal government. MOVE crowdfunded the purchase of multiple adjacent homes in the city to build their headquarters, where members of the group lived communally and planned protests. Unfortunately, it was not long before they caught the attention of local police, who were threatened by their philosophy and their presence in the community. Most mainstream coverage of this story highlights the fact that neighbors were unhappy with the living conditions in the compound, and it is often claimed that the police only became involved because they received complaints from concerned citizens who were uncomfortable that such a radical activist group was in their backyard. However, it is important to point out that this was during a time of great social tension, when racists would often use police as a tool of violence against their darker-skinned neighbors. In 1978, MOVE had their first major standoff with police after the city attempted to forcibly remove them from their homes. When police attempted to enter the house to take people away, a shootout erupted, and Philadelphia police officer James J. Ramp was caught in the crossfire and killed. Members of MOVE have insisted all these years that Ramp was actually killed by one of his fellow officers in a case of friendly fire, which is an extremely plausible explanation considering that Ramp was shot in the back of the neck. 7 other police officers, 5 firefighters, 3 MOVE members, and 3 bystanders were also injured. Despite the fact that there was no evidence tying any particular person to the single bullet that killed Ramp, 9 members of MOVE were each sentenced to a maximum of 100 years in prison for third-degree murder. 1 person was killed with 1 bullet and 9 people were sent to jail for their entire lives. After the conviction of these political prisoners, who would eventually come to be known as the MOVE 9, the organization understandably became more militant and radical. Then, in 1981, the group established a new headquarters across town at 6221 Osage Avenue in the Cobbs Creek area of West Philadelphia. In addition to rebuilding their commune and staging protests, MOVE also set up a bullhorn outside of their headquarters that would regularly blast anti-government messages out to the community. In 1985, after years of legal conflict, Mayor W. Wilson Goode and Police Commissioner Gregor J. Somber classified MOVE as a terrorist organization and planned a full-scale raid of their headquarters. This time, police fully evacuated the entire neighborhood before moving in on the compound. There were nearly 500 police officers gathered at the scene, ludicrously, ferociously well-armed flak jackets, tear gas, SWAT gear, .50 and .60 caliber machine guns, and an anti-tank machine gun for good measure. Deluge guns were pointed from fire trucks. The state police had sent a helicopter. The city had shut off the water and electricity for the entire block. And, we'd come to learn, there were explosives on hand. One witness described the events to NPR. After a standoff lasting several hours, police gave MOVE a 15-minute warning to surrender around 6 a.m. and they were met with gunshots from inside the building. That is when police returned fire, unloading over 10,000 rounds at the MOVE headquarters over the course of 90 minutes. Next, the police dropped a bomb on the building from a helicopter, igniting multiple homes on fire. Ramona Africa, one of the few survivors of the attack, spoke about her experience in an interview with Democracy Now! In 2010, saying that, "In terms of the bombing, after being attacked the way we were, first with 4 deluge hoses by the fire department and then tons of tear gas, and then being shot at, the police admit to shooting over 10,000 rounds of bullets at us in the first 90 minutes. There was a lull. You know, it was quiet for a little bit. And then, without any warning at all, 2 members of the Philadelphia Police Department's bomb squad got in a Pennsylvania State Police helicopter and flew over our home and dropped a satchel of C4, a powerful military explosive that no municipal police department has. They had to get it from the federal government, from the FBI. And without any announcement of warning or anything, they dropped that bomb on the roof of our home." The MOVE bombing is easy to sweep under the rug because its victims were radicals who rejected the norms of mainstream society. These people were peaceful until they were attacked, and it was only then that they responded with force, an action that would be considered self-defense in any other situation, but sadly fighting back against the state is typically portrayed as terrorism, instead of defense.
Here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
Today marks the 30th anniversary of a massive police operation in Philadelphia that culminated in the helicopter bombing of the headquarters of a radical group known as MOVE. The fire from the attack incinerated 6 adults and 5 children and destroyed 65 homes. Despite 2 grand jury investigations and a commission finding the top officials were grossly negligent, no one from city government was criminally charged. Here is how the bombing was initially reported in Philadelphia on WCAU radio.
I've just been advised that we have new videotape of the episode that apparently ended, we think ended, the MOVE situation tonight, the dropping of an incendiary device. And let's take a careful look at this. 5:27 p.m. State Police helicopter drops it. There is the explosion. As you can see, a very dramatic explosion that occurs 30 seconds and really rips into the MOVE compound. There you see the bunker, which soon will go up in flames. And that was the explosion close up. Now, if there's anybody there, standing there, it's obvious they couldn't survive that explosion.
That was WCAU TV, actually. We saw some video there. MOVE was a Philadelphia-based radical movement dedicated to black liberation and a back-to-nature lifestyle. It was founded by John Africa, and all its members took on the surname Africa. In 2010, Ramona Africa, the sole adult survivor of the attack, told Democracy Now! What happened as the bomb was dropped on her house.
In terms of the bombing, after being attacked the way we were, first with 4 deluge hoses by the fire department, and then tons of tear gas, and then being shot at, the police admit to shooting over 10,000 rounds of bullets at us in the first 90 minutes. There was a lull. You know, it was quiet for a little bit. And then, without any warning at all, 2 members of the Philadelphia Police Department's bomb squad got in a Pennsylvania State Police helicopter and flew over our home and dropped a satchel containing C4, a powerful military explosive that no municipal police department has. They had to get it from the federal government, from the FBI. And without any announcement or warning or anything, they dropped that bomb on the roof of our home.
That was Ramona Africa, the sole adult survivor of the attack on Move 30 years ago today. Today, a memorial will take place at the site of the bombing on Osage Avenue. Well, for more, we're joined in Philadelphia by Lynn Washington, award-winning journalist, former columnist for the Philadelphia Tribune, who's covered Move since 1975. He teaches journalism at Temple University. Both he and Juan were there that day covering the Move bombing for the Philadelphia Daily News. We welcome you back to Democracy Now!, Lynn. Talk about that day, and Juan, too, your memories.
Good morning, Amy. Good morning, Juan. The one word that I would use to describe that day is surreal. To have witnessed police firing 10,000 bullets within a 90-minute period. The bullets were so intense that they were raining from the sky like hail. And then later in the afternoon to see a bomb dropped on a house occupied by children. And then the very callous decision of the authorities to let the fire burn was just unreal. It's a sight and a memory that I can't get out of my mind.
Well, Lynn, I remember it was a Mother's Day, 1985, and we were out there most of the day and saw that helicopter suddenly hover over the house and drop something. And I remember saying to you at the time, what's going on, until the explosion occurred. But the most fascinating thing, as you said, most people are not aware, is how long before, after the bomb dropped, before the firefighters even attempted to douse the flames that erupted.
It was almost an hour because we were sitting there on Cobbs Creek Parkway, and you and I were both talking, and actually talking to some of the firefighters as to why they weren't doing it. And the firefighters didn't know. What they were told was to not fight the fire, which is unbelievable. And we could watch, or actually we saw, the fire go from what looked like the beginning of a backyard barbecue grill fire to a blazing inferno. And we just literally watched it jump across the roof lines and also across the street. So by the time that the decision was finally made to fight the fire, it was a blazing inferno, and it was totally out of control.
And talk about who was in government, Juan, at the time. Who was the police commissioner? Who was the mayor? How did this bombing take place? The police bombed not just the Move house, ended up burning down 2 blocks, city blocks in Philadelphia.
Yeah, because they didn't fight the fire, and it spread and destroyed the entire, square block area. But obviously, the mayor at the time, Lynn, was Wilson Goode, the first African American mayor of the city, and the commission report later indicated that Goode really wasn't in control of the situation. It was the police commissioner and the fire commissioner.
So it was Rizzo entirely?
No, it wasn't Rizzo. It was who was the police commissioner? It's been so long ago, I've forgotten.
The police commissioner at the, the police commissioner at the time was a guy named Gregor Sambor. And Mayor Goode appointed him because they were trying to purge the department in some way of the influence of Frank Rizzo, who had been the police commissioner and then the mayor during the 70s when police brutality reached epidemic levels in Philadelphia. One of the things that gets lost in all of this is that, yes, there was this horrific bombing in the middle of May 13th, the day after Mother's Day in 1985. But actually a few days before the bombing, Sambor had ordered an anti-drug sweep that ended up arresting hundreds of people who were innocent, had nothing to do with drugs. The city ended up paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to settle that. And 2 weeks later, there was a dragnet in a Hispanic neighborhood where they were arresting people from 6 to 65 years old in an investigation involving the death of a police officer. And that death was initially reported as a domestic dispute between a police officer, another police officer, and a police woman who was married to one of the police officers.
I want to go back to Ramona Africa, the sole adult survivor of the attack, describing what happened after the bomb was dropped on her house.
and without any announcement or warning or anything, they dropped that bomb on the roof of our home. Now, at that point, we didn't know exactly what they had done. We heard the loud explosion. The house kind of shook, but it never entered my mind that they dropped a bomb on us. But the bomb did, in fact, ignite a fire. And not long after that, it got very, very hot in the house, and the smoke was getting thicker. At first, we thought it was tear gas. But as it got thicker, it became clear that this wasn't tear gas, that this was something else. And then we could hear the trees outside of our house crackling and realized that our home was on fire. And we immediately tried to get our children, our animals, our dogs and cats, and ourselves out of that blazing inferno.
Africa's sole adult survivor of the attack. So talk about who died, Lynn, how people tried to escape and what happened.
Yes, inside the house were at that point 5 children aged 7 to 13 years old. They perished along with 6 adults. One of the 6 adults was the founder of the MOVE organization, John Africa. A number of MOVE members tried to escape, and as you've indicated, Ramona was the sole surviving adult. There was a child named Birdie Africa who later became Michael Ward. They were able to escape. When they were coming out, we heard gunfire. And it was later determined that police fired on the escaping MOVE members, driving some of them back into the house. But in the convoluted logic that many of us have seen over the last year from grand juries in St. Louis County and in New York and in southern Ohio, where the guy was shot in a Walmart, the grand jury, under the control of Philadelphia prosecutors, determined that MOVE members ran back into the house not because police were firing at them, but because they mistakenly believed that police were firing at them, and or they ran back to intentionally commit suicide.
And Lynn, what were the main conclusions of the MOVE Commission that was established subsequent to that tragedy?
Well, the MOVE Commission, which was a panel that the Mayor Good had set up to investigate it, but had no power to do anything other than make recommendations, found monumental incompetence on the part of all city officials, from the mayor through the managing director to the police director, or should I say the police commissioner. One of the findings, though, I think one of the most prominent findings, was that the deaths of those children were unjustified homicides, and they recommended a criminal investigation and also charges to be brought. The grand jury determined that they were not unjustified homicides, that the deaths were as a result of this proposed or presumed suicide, and they came to many startling conclusions, one of which was the bomb that was dropped on the children. There was no illegality there because the force of the bomb only applied to the adults in the house, as if the bomb could blow up and the fire could burn and it wouldn't impact the children. It was absolutely ridiculous, but it's the kind of convoluted reasoning we see too often with grand juries involving issues of police abuse.
I wanted to turn to imprisoned journalist Mumia Abu-Jamal, who's being held at FCI Mahanoy. He reported extensively on MOVE before he was convicted of killing a police officer, a crime he says he did not commit. Last month, he recorded a new essay for the 30th anniversary of the MOVE bombing from prison.
May 13th at 30. Why should we care what happened on May 13th, 1985? I mean, seriously. That was 30 years ago, a long time ago, way back when. Know what I mean? Most people won't say that, but they think that. Why, indeed? I'll tell you why. Because what happened then is a harbinger of what's happening now all across America. I don't mean bombing people, not yet, that is. I mean the visceral hatreds and violent contempt once held for MOVE is now visited upon average people, not just radicals and revolutionaries like MOVE. In May 1985, Police officials justified the vicious attacks on MOVE children by saying they too were combatants. In Ferguson, Missouri, as police and National Guard confronted citizens, guess how cops described them in their own files? Enemies. Enemy combatants, anyone? Then look at 12-year-old Tamir Rice of Cleveland. Boys, men, girls, women, it doesn't matter. When many people stood in silence, or worse, in bitter acquiescence to the bombing, shooting, and carnage of May 13, 1985 upon MOVE, they opened the door to the ugliness of today's police terrorism from coast to coast. There is a direct line from then to now. May 13, 1985 led to the eerie RoboCop present. If it had been justly and widely condemned then, there would be no now, no Ferguson, no South Carolina, no Los Angeles, no Baltimore. The barbaric police bombing of May 13th, 1985, and the whitewash of the murders of 11 MOVE men, women, and children opened a door that still has not been closed. We are today living with those consequences. From Imprisoned Nation, this is Mumia Abu Jamal.
Mumia Abu Jamal recorded that commentary in prison. Last night, a prison nurse called Abu Jamal's wife and told her he'd been moved to the hospital for a second time this year. His supporters say they're concerned. He had a fever and open wounds and sores on his leg. That does it for our show on this 30th anniversary of the MOVE bombing. Thanks so much to Lynn Washington in Philadelphia. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez for another.
Hey Charlotte County, this is Charlotte County Cop Watch, and I just wanted you to know that I am using this stuff under fair use, and also remember to like and subscribe this channel. Also too, keep in mind I do not make any money on YouTube. This is 5 hours work a day, you know, fighting for freedom. And you can donate with PayPal and Patreon. I just want you to think about this. If everybody gives to PayPal and Patreon, Patreon is every month. Actually, PayPal you can do every month. I have 12,000 subscribers. If everybody gives, I can quit my regular job and go full-time investigations on Charlotte County and possibly even more and beyond. So just keep that in mind. If everybody helps out, I can go full-time doing this. Thanks.